welcome to Give God 90 Radio on Demand. My name is Jerry Mitchell, your host for Give God 90. Thank you for joining me for just a little while as we look at something today. You have probably asked yourself, how did that verse get in my Bible? First, let me thank you for joining me again and remind you that you can download the Give God 90 app. It is absolutely free for your Apple or Android device. Or, now, how about this? Because of the Spreaker podcast platform, we are now available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and other podcast venues. It distributes them out there into the world, and we are making a difference out there, trying to convince people to live the way their Creator designed them to live. Also, we're trying to answer the tough questions. You know, I get questions all the time, and people realize I'm not afraid of the hard questions because we will search out an answer. It might not be the answer I like. It probably won't be the answer you like, but we get the answers, okay? Because I sincerely believe that even though there's things we don't have enough information to be able to answer, there is an answer for everything, even if that answer is we don't have enough information to determine, what's really going on, okay? And if there's not enough information, well, there's not enough information. There's things in the Bible that, what's the color of God's throne? Well, we're really never told. We don't have that information. It's just not there. We get some visions from different prophets, but when somebody says, is it gold, is it this, is it, I don't know. We don't have enough information, and there's things there we just have to accept we don't have information for. But today, because I've had some questions over the past couple of weeks about some really weird things, and I'm going to take just a couple of verses to show you what I mean about these things. When we think about how did that verse get into my Bible, one of the questions that came up, and it's been kind of, I've been avoiding it, I'll be honest with you. And that is, if we look at Proverbs 26:11, it talks about a dog returning to its own vomit. And people ask me, why did Solomon put that in there? Well, if you read the entire thing, you get it. He says, just as a dog returns to its own vomit, a fool goes back to his own follies. In other words, a dog's going to throw something up, and he's going to come back later, and that wasn't so bad, I'll eat it again. And I know that sounds disgusting, right? But it's no more disgusting than someone who does something completely foolish, and then, they realize, that wasn't very smart. But then they turn around and do the same thing all over again. And I need to be careful how I present this, because you may be one of these people. I've done things. I have done things and I thought, why did I do that? Maybe, there's some food that I really like that I need to avoid because it upsets my stomach, right? I am one of these weird people. I can't drink soft drinks. Whether pick a brand, if it's carbonated, sugary stuff that's bad for you anyway that I shouldn't be drinking, it's probably a good thing I can't drink it because it upsets my stomach, gives me a headache. It just isn't good for me physically. So I haven't drank. Some people call them soft drinks. Some people in the Midwest call them pops. Other countries call them different things, but you get the idea. Coke, Pepsi, those kind of things. So I avoid them. They're not good for me. But every once in a while, I get a taste for something, and I'm like, maybe just a taste wouldn't hurt, but it does. So, that foolishness goes back, right? I know people who eat too much. They'll go, oh, I'm never going to eat like that again. And next week, they go, oh, I'm never going to eat like that again. Next week, oh, you get the picture, right? So just as a dog goes back and says, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, people have the same tendency to do foolish things over and over and over again. Now, don't get me wrong. There's a difference between being foolish and just habitually making bad choices. Someone who has been arrested for their third, fourth, fifth, sixth, up to their 10th, 12th DUI, driving while intoxicated. That's just flat out habitual bad choices. That's not being foolish anymore. You have gone way past being foolish at number 2. Okay. Once you habitually make bad choices, it would probably be a better idea for you to change your lifestyle. Give God 90 can help with that. If you go to givegod90.com, we can help you improve your life and avoid making those bad choices. I'm not saying that you're not going to every once in a while go back and do something foolish, like overeat, hang around with the same friends that get you in trouble. You do things that way. It's a people thing. It doesn't have to be. You can learn to make better choices, and hopefully, as you progress through the improvement process, you will learn, those folks over there were fun, but if I hang out with them, I'm going to wind up doing something I don't want to do. Maybe the next choice you make is, they serve really good food at that restaurant, but every time I go in there, I eat way too much, and I feel just terrible. If you feel terrible, if something makes you uncomfortable, you should choose to avoid that. Even if it was fun, even if and like I say, there's foods that I really, really like that I shouldn't eat because they affect me negatively. That's what we're talking about with Solomon. Now, Peter actually uses this later on, and he includes, not only does a dog return to its own vomit, but a pig, you can wash a pig, but it's just going to go back and wallow in the mud again. It's the nature of the beast, so to speak, is what Peter's saying. Because pigs like mud, right? Given the choice, pigs would rather lay in clean water because of their way they're designed with their anatomy. But mud suffices. It keeps the sun off them. It keeps, other things going on. And so we think of pigs being dirty because they like to wallow in the mud just because of the way they're designed, the way the sun affects them, the way the temperature affects them. Other things that go into that have that effect on things. Some things in Scripture that we read that we think are a little weird could very well not be weird at all if you read it in the original language. There are things in there known as Hebrewisms. Like Adam was, man made out of what? Well, in Hebrew, it's Adamah, made out of dirt, made out of mud, made out of the earth. So it's kind of a play on words in Hebrew. And there's several of those things that don't translate well into English. So some of the, figures of speech vary from language to language. English has figures of speech that really don't work in other languages. Years ago, there was a soft drink company that, and I'm going to have to use the name of the soft drink company. I really don't like advertising for them, but okay. It was Pepsi brings you back to life was their advertising slogan. Well, it worked great in the United States and other English-speaking countries, but it didn't work in China because the closest thing they could translate it to in Chinese, or one of the dialects of Chinese, I should say, is if you drink Pepsi and bring your ancestors back from the dead. That's the way it translated. Now, that doesn't make a very good marketing slogan for a company, does it? Here, drink this. Ooh, maybe, my great-great-great-grandfather didn't need to come back, okay? However you want to discuss that. Figures of speech don't always translate well into other languages. figures of speech don't always translate well into different cultural types either. When I was younger, that we had a saying, "Let the hair go with the hide," and basically what it is it goes way back to when people would skin their animals, right? Sometimes you had you wanted hides with the fur on. Sometimes you wanted hides with the hair off. So when letting the hair go with the hide is kind of a figure of speech that means, this, we're going to make this work, or if we do something in a certain way, it's going to have to work out. We're just going to give something up. Okay, we're going to give something up to get an overall complete picture, maybe. One of the people I used to work for used that expression a lot when we were, at the time I was very young and working in construction. He would, we would be doing something, and he said, well, we're going to lay this board here, we're going to do this. It's not going to be perfect, but we'll just let the hair go with the hide. So, even though it wasn't the best situation, it was, the best we could make it. Another thing that used to be said was making a silk purse. You can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. A figure of speech, it's not going to work in other languages. You can't refine something that delicate out of something that's not designed to be that way. Other times in Scripture, what we look at is things that are absolutely a slap in the face. That's the best way I can describe it. And sometimes we need to be slapped in the face. Ezekiel's very good at using those types of figures of speech. Another one that is very good was Isaiah. And if you look at Isaiah chapter 36, and I'm not going to be very specific about this, but if you read through there, you're going to find something that you're going to go, ew, that's just disgusting. And it is, really. But what they're trying to do there is make sure you understand how serious what's going to happen is. That's what they're looking at there. That's what they're looking for there. It is something that is said, and it's slapping you in the face to wake you up to say, you need to look at this. You need to understand how bad this situation is going to be. Okay? That in itself is not drastic. Some people might find the language, depending on what translation they read, offensive. That's okay. Sometimes God looks at you and says, you know what? If you need to be offended for me to get my point across, then be offended. And really, it's pointing to a couple of things, and even though it's specific to the situation they're in, it speaks volumes to the situation we may find ourselves in, probably in the not too distant future. Okay? So just think, and I hope you're curious enough now to go read Isaiah 36 and see what I'm talking about, and think about what they're talking about, this city under siege, and where we might be in the not too distant future. So don't think for a moment that things can't get bad. All right? We're told over and over and over again in Scripture, things can get bad. Things are going to get bad. There's a reason they use that figure of speech over and over and repeatedly, that great and terrible day. Okay? There's a reason that figure of speech is used repeatedly in Scripture. That great and terrible day. Another thing we need to look at, we read something and we'll say, well, that's just weird. Why did they use this? And sometimes it's funny and meant to be funny. sometimes we think it's funny in English and it's not meant to be funny. There's a passage in Mark where Yeshua's about to be arrested, Mark 14, and it talks about this fellow who has this linen sheet wrapped around him. That's all he's wearing is this linen sheet. And when he's captured, he slips out of the sheet and he escapes naked. Now, why would that be included in that part of the story? And we look at it, we read it, and we're like, what is going on here? It's just really weird. Until you remember that people who had problems recognized who Yeshua is, and they would follow him. The lady with the issue of blood, she snuck through the crowd. Now, if she hadn't been healed, she would have been killed because of the way the law was written at the time. Now, the guy with the sheet, he obviously was looking for something. He was looking for some help, right? He didn't get it. He's the one that got away, so to speak. That's what that's referring to. He's the one that was seeking for something. He was looking for something. He was searching, but he didn't get what he came for. He was chased off, and I could go for a long time about how the modern Christian churches like to chase people off. But that's a story for another time, and I might do something about that very soon. Now, we look at other verses, and we think, how in the world did that get in my Bible? We have stories about the way people die, the way they're killed, or the way that, they have some help being killed in a couple of instances. We look at things and we say, why is this included? What's going on? And it takes a little bit of research to figure it out sometimes. But here is the good part. If you are willing to put in a little bit of effort, you can figure it out. There might be a verse that's been bugging you and bugging you and bugging you. Here's a way that you figure it out. You go back, you look at it, and you can sometimes use some Bible software programs that have very good cross-references, okay? And you can cross-reference where that particular verse is going to take you. You might be able to use an interlinear program and find out what the language has to say about it. You can also, I use this as typically as a last resort because I don't want somebody else to tell me how I should think about this. But you can look up commentaries and see what other people have had to say about this, and don't stop with one. Okay, read several, because several different people are going to have several different ideas or concepts about what a particular verse means. Another thing you can do is start back at maybe the beginning of the chapter, or maybe the chapter before, and read what's going on, what brought you to that particular point. And as you go through, now I actually did post on Facebook and some other places, I did a teaching for Messianic Delaware where I actually said, walked people through how I look at particular passages, or one of the ways I should say I look at particular passages. I use many different methods, but this happens to be a favorite, where you dissect these passages and you figure out how something's being said, who's doing the saying, and we dissect it that way. It's available, and if you go to either Messianic Delaware, their teaching page, it's called Beyond Hermeneutics, or you can go to my YouTube channel, and it's on there as well. But there's references and things there that you can use if you want to dissect the passage you're looking at. All of these tools that we have access to today, all of them, From the searchable Bible programs, the cross-reference programs, we have all of these things, and they allow us to figure these things out. All it takes is some effort. And if it's, excuse me, if it's something that's been bugging you really, really bad, you're going to take an effort. You're going to figure it out, and you're really going to dig into it. As I like to say, dig through the language, culture, and the history to find out what's going on, right? Well, don't forget also, and this is important, when you're looking at these passages, it's perfectly okay to pray over that passage and say, Lord, I just don't get why this is in here. I don't understand what message you're trying to send. One of the things we often forget and overlook is if you have access to the author of material, it's always better to go ask the author, right? Well, we have access to the author through prayer. And when we use that access, then we have a direct line of communication. So don't overlook that at all. Don't be afraid to say, okay, God, I don't get what's happening here. You need to explain this to me. And you'd be amazed, it might take a bit of time. It might take 2 or 3 people that he's going to use to come show you what it means. And then they might not take you by the hand and guide you step by step. But eventually you're going to get your answer. And you're going to get your answer in a way, and then you're going to be able to look back and go, wow, you know what? I've had 24 people come to me this week and tell me the same exact thing. And until this particular person came, I didn't understand what was going on. Now I can look back and I can see all of these people were trying to tell me the same thing. Isn't it amazing how that works? We can be so hard-headed sometimes, which is why, as I said earlier, sometimes he will slap us in the face with stuff. Because we need that. We need that. He knows that we're hard-headed. He knows we're stubborn. He knows what it's going to take to get through to us. But if we're persistent, it will happen. It will happen. The verses that we read that appear obscure may not be as obscure as you think they are. It may be a language problem. It may be a translation problem. It might be a me problem. Say that with me. It could be a me problem. If I want to be too stubborn, too hard-headed, and too, I want to have tunnel vision where I'm not going to accept anybody else's answer. I'm not going to accept anybody else's input. This is the way I've always read it. This is the way it's going to be read. I'm convinced I'm never going to get it. That's a me problem. That's a me problem. Get over the me problems. Okay? I'm just going to say that flat out, plain and simple. You need to get over the me problems. Because it's not all about us. It's not about us. It's about the Almighty. It's about what He needs for us to understand. It's about what He's trying to explain to us. And sometimes He explains things to us in a very poetic, very gentle, very loving, caring, tender way. And sometimes He explains things to us, with a baseball bat. And each and every one of us need that at different times. There are times when, I'm often a very harsh person, and there are times that I speak to people in not a harsh tone. I will be, that soft-spoken, caring type person at times when that particular person needs to hear that. But typically, especially with the folks that come to me, they need more of the harsh tone. They need more of the baseball bat kind of thing. The old story about when you're training dogs, there's certain breeds of dogs you train with a stern voice. There's certain breeds of dogs you train with a rolled-up newspaper, and there's certain breeds of dogs you train with a baseball bat. Typically, I get the ones that need training with a baseball bat. I'm talking about people, not dogs. So don't be afraid to explore various methods of getting to your answer. Prayer is always the best way to start. Sometimes there may not be enough information for you to get an answer. It just depends. Other times, the answer you get, you might not like. That seems to be the biggest rub with folks, is the answer they get, they can't accept because it's not what they expected. That's a story for another time, though. That's a whole nother lesson for another time. But don't get tunnel vision. Don't get hung up on things. And don't be gullible either. You have to search these things out. When you see a verse that appears to be obscure or weird or different, maybe it's the way it's being presented to you. Maybe it's the way that it has been presented, and it's just been wrong. It's that simple. But don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to question, what's that verse doing in my Bible? There's a reason it's there. There's a reason it's there. Even the mistakes, there's a reason they're there. Okay? And yes, I know I just said there's mistakes in the Bible. Typically that comes from human hands, not from divine intervention. But there's a reason that they're there. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been a pleasure to have you join me today. Hopefully, this has explained some of the things that, you're not alone. That's the big thing. You're not alone. When you look at something and you go, I just don't understand why that's here, many, many, many people are in the same situation. Don't be afraid to find your answers. Don't be afraid to hunt them out, search them out, do what you need to figure out what that verse is doing in there if you're having problems with it. Again, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful week.